Ever been called controlling? Like you're quietly staging a takeover? That was new. I'm not exactly empire-building material. I struggle to pick a movie, but according to my wife, I was Julius Caesar, and judging by the whispers from her mother and sister, the Brutus Committee had already taken their seats in the living room. Let me give you some context, because without it, none of this makes sense. Actually, with it, it still barely makes sense. But at least you'll understand the specific flavor of circus we're dealing with. Saturday morning, Jade comes downstairs the way she always does when she's found something on the internet. Slightly breathless, phone first, eye contact second. Evan, look at this. I look. It's a self-development course, 12 modules. A woman with a linen blazer on the thumbnail, who appears to have achieved inner peace through aggressive eye contact with the camera. The course is called something like Reclaim Your Authentic Blueprint or Unlock the Sovereign You. I don't remember exactly. They all have that same energy, like a TED Talk and a fortune cookie had a baby and charged $247 for it. It's incredible, Jade says. The reviews are insane. Now here's what you need to know about me. I'm not a dream crusher. I genuinely like that Jade gets excited about things. It's one of the reasons I married her. She has this quality where she can light up over something and make you feel like maybe the world isn't actually a slow administrative nightmare. That's rare. That's worth protecting. What I'm less enthusiastic about, and this is relevant, is that this was not the first course. It was not the second. If I'm being precise, and I will be, we were somewhere in the range of course number 6. There was the manifestation journal, the breathwork subscription, the ceramics class that lasted 11 days and left us with 2 lopsided bowls and a kiln rental fee. The online Italian lessons, grazie, arrivederci, that's it. That's the whole language she retained. And the digital declutter program, which she purchased on her phone, which she uses approximately 14 hours a day. 6 courses, 1 completion. And that one was a free trial. So when I saw the linen blazer woman and the $247 price tag, I did what any reasonable partner does. I said very carefully, with a light tone, not a lecture, not a PowerPoint, something like, hey, what if you sat with it for a few days, just to make sure it's the right one? I even added a smile. I budgeted for the smile. It was a good smile. Jade heard, I don't think you can do it. I know this because she got that specific kind of quiet. Not angry quiet, not tired quiet. The quiet where she's decided something about you and is filing it away. The emotional equivalent of a sticky note that says, discuss later, except later is never scheduled and the note just stays there accumulating interest. She didn't say anything. She went upstairs. I figured we'd talk when I got back. I had errands. The kind of Saturday errands that feel important when you're doing them, and completely invisible the moment they're done. Hardware store, dry cleaner, that thing at the bank where you stand there and realize you could have done it on the app. Normal Saturday, low stakes, nothing to worry about. I knew her mother Diane and her sister Kayla were coming over for their weekly tea situation. I knew this the way you know about scheduled maintenance. You're aware of it, you don't think much about it. You assume everything runs as usual. What I did not account for was what happens when Jade is in a specific mood. Her mother has opinions, and her sister has been watching relationship content online. In that combination, what you get is not tea. What you get is a tribunal. When I came back, I could feel it immediately. The energy in the room was different, not hostile. Worse, organized. Diane and Kayla were still there, sitting with the particular posture of people who have recently concluded something important. Jade was in the kitchen. She came out when she heard the door. I said hi. She said hi. Then she looked at me with an expression I can only describe as freshly informed, and said, "They said you're suppressing me." I stood there for a moment. Diane nodded from the couch, slowly, like a judge confirming a verdict. Kayla nodded too, with slightly more enthusiasm, like a judge who's been waiting for this case. And I thought, okay, so that's what we're doing today. Here's the thing about being accused of something you didn't do. Your options are limited and none of them are great. You can get defensive, which proves you're defensive. You can explain yourself, which proves you're controlling the narrative. You can stay silent, which proves you're emotionally unavailable. It's a closed system. Whoever designed it knew exactly what they were doing. I chose option 4, which wasn't on the original list. Mild, pleasant, surgical curiosity. I set my keys on the counter, sat down across from Diane and Kayla with the energy of a man who has just arrived at a dinner party he's genuinely happy to attend. Suppressing, I said. Walk me through that. Diane straightened up. This was her moment. Diane is the kind of person who has strong opinions about everything and expertise in almost nothing, which in conversation creates this fascinating confidence gap, like watching someone give very detailed directions to a city they've never visited. She launched in. Something about how real support means full agreement, how questioning someone's decisions, any decisions, is a form of control. How my tone when I suggested Jade wait on the course was, and I'm quoting here, textbook minimization. Diane has never read a textbook on this subject. I am fairly certain of that. Kayla backed her up immediately, the way a hype man backs up a rapper, not adding content, just energy. Exactly, she said. You're basically telling her she can't trust herself. Kayla, for context, is in a relationship where her boyfriend forgot her birthday 2 years running, and she explained it away both times using astrology. But she had thoughts about my marriage. Strong ones, sourced from somewhere on the internet, that I can only assume had very high engagement. I nodded, slowly, with the expression of a man genuinely taking notes. So, I said, just to make sure I understand, if Jade wants to do something, the supportive response is always yes? Yes, said Diane. No hesitation? No hesitation. No questions? Questions are doubt, Kayla said. Doubt is dismissal. Right. I nodded again. That tracks. Jade was watching me from the armchair. She had the look of someone who had expected a fire and was now watching me carefully arrange the kindling into a very pleasant decorative display. Suspicious, but curious. Here's what Diane and Kayla wanted from me. Emotion. Pushback. The satisfaction of watching a man get defensive and then try to explain himself into a corner while they calmly dismantled each point. That's the script. That's what they'd prepared for. What they were getting instead was a man who seemed to be agreeing with them, which is a completely different and significantly more disorienting experience. You know what? I said. I think you might be onto something real here, and I want to take this seriously. I genuinely do. Diane blinked. This was not the expected response. But here's the thing, I continued, keeping my tone warm and collaborative. If we're going to establish some new principles for how our marriage operates, and it sounds like that's what we're discussing, I think we should do it properly. Put it in writing. Make it clear. Kayla looked at Diane. Diane looked at Kayla. So here's my proposal, I said. You two clearly have a vision for what a healthy, supportive marriage looks like. Great. I want to understand it fully. Write it down. The rules, the expectations, what I should do, what I shouldn't do. Jade can contribute too. And then we sit down in a few days, go through it together, and I will do my absolute best to follow it. To the letter. Silence. Not hostile silence. Processing silence. I smiled. The same smile from the morning. Still a good smile. I just want to make sure I get it right, I added. I'd hate to keep making mistakes out of ignorance when we could have a clear framework. What happened next was interesting. Diane, who had walked in fully prepared to argue, suddenly had to shift into a completely different mode. Construction instead of demolition. She was an excellent critic. Whether she was an equally excellent architect remained to be seen. We'd need a few days, she said finally, to put it together properly. Of course, I said. Take your time. Kayla was nodding again, but slower this time. like the hype man who just realized the concert was in a different genre than expected. Jade, across the room, was looking at me with an expression I know well. It's the expression she gets when she suspects I'm doing something clever but can't quite locate what it is. Part flattered, part wary. Like watching a magician and enjoying the trick, but not being entirely sure you weren't just pickpocketed. "So we're doing this?" she asked. "Absolutely," I said. "I think it's a great idea." And I meant it. Completely. In the way that a chess player means it when they say your move. Diane and Kayla left about 40 minutes later with the energy of women who believed they had won something. They were already talking in the hallway, quietly, with the focused intensity of a campaign team the night before a debate. I went to the kitchen and made tea. Jade came in a few minutes later and leaned against the counter, looking at me. "You're not actually going to follow their rules," she said. "I'm going to follow them exactly," I said. "That's the whole point." She looked at me for a long moment. "Evan." "Jade." "Okay." She poured herself a cup and went back to the living room, and I stood there with the quiet satisfaction of a man who has just agreed, with complete sincerity, to let 3 other people prove his point for him. They arrived on Wednesday with notes. Actual notes. Diane had a legal pad, yellow, college-ruled, approximately 4 pages filled on both sides. Kayla had her phone open to what appeared to be a shared document. A shared document. They had collaborated, asynchronously, with revision history presumably. I had made coffee, put out some cookies, set 4 chairs around the kitchen table at equal distances, because at this point, the least I could do was commit to the bit aesthetically. Jade was already seated when they came in. She had the careful, slightly formal energy of someone attending a meeting they didn't technically call, but had definitely discussed beforehand. She was wearing the expression I associate with her being on board in principle, but quietly monitoring for turbulence. Diane sat down, placed the legal pad in front of her, and adjusted it slightly. Kayla put her phone face up on the table, document visible, like a lawyer presenting Exhibit A. I looked at all of this. "I want to say," I offered, "that I was expecting a conversation, but I respect the preparation. This already looks more organized than most things I've attended professionally." "We wanted to be thorough," Diane said. "You were thorough," I confirmed. Kayla cleared her throat. She actually cleared her throat, like we were about to begin a formal proceeding. And then they began. Diane read from the legal pad. Kayla occasionally cross-referenced her phone. Jade listened and nodded, and in several places added small verbal confirmations. "Yes, right, that's what I meant. The way you agree with something that's been articulated better than you could have done yourself, even if the articulation is, technically, completely unhinged." The rules, as presented, were as follows. 1. A man should never question a woman's decisions. Questions imply doubt. Doubt implies distrust. Distrust is the beginning of control. 2. Feelings are sufficient grounds for action. If something feels right, that is adequate justification. Analysis of outcomes is not supportive behavior. 3. Support must be unconditional. Conditional support. Support that includes caveats, concerns, or historical context, is not support. It is management. 4. Male initiative in a relationship is appropriate only when requested. Unsolicited input, even well-meaning, constitutes overreach. 5. Past behavior cannot be cited as evidence in any current discussion. Each situation must be evaluated as if it is the first time it has occurred. 6. Consequences are to be experienced, not anticipated. Attempting to prevent a negative outcome by raising concerns is paternalistic. Negative outcomes are part of the journey. I listened to all 6 of these with genuine attentiveness. I took notes. I asked clarifying questions. Is that an absolute rule, or does context apply? What's the threshold for a feeling being sufficient grounds? So historical data is inadmissible or just discouraged? each of which Diane answered with the confidence of someone who has given a great deal of thought to something for a very short period of time. At one point, I looked up from my notepad and said, "I want to be honest with you. I came in expecting a conversation, and what I'm getting is something I can only describe as a governing document. This is remarkable. I mean that. Most couples spend years without any formal constitutional framework. We're ahead of the curve." Diane looked pleased. Kayla nodded. Jade pressed her lips together in a way that meant she was not sure whether to laugh. "I do have one question," I said, "just for clarity." "Go ahead," said Diane. "Rule 5, past behavior can't be cited. Does that apply symmetrically, or just in one direction?" Brief pause. "It applies," Diane said, with slightly less certainty, "to creating an atmosphere of support." "Perfect," I said. "I'll note that it applies to creating an atmosphere of support." I wrote it down, word for word. Then I looked up with the expression of a man who has just been handed exactly what he asked for. "I want you to know," I said, "that I accept all of these, fully. I think it's genuinely helpful to have clarity. No more ambiguity. No more misunderstandings. From this point forward, I follow the framework." Diane sat back with the posture of a woman who has just won a negotiation she didn't realize was a negotiation. Kayla's face did something complicated. Satisfaction mixed with the faint, unlocatable sense that something was slightly off, but she couldn't identify what. Jade looked at me across the table with those eyes that know me better than anyone on earth and said nothing for a moment. Then, "You're sure?" "Completely," I said. "You wanted to be heard. You've been heard. The framework is clear. I'm going to follow it with absolute precision. It would actually be disrespectful to do anything less." I paused. "I might keep a log, just to make sure I'm staying compliant. Maybe a brief daily summary. Would a shared document work? Kayla, you seem good with those." Kayla blinked. You don't need to." "I want to get it right," I said. "I really do." The meeting wrapped up about 20 minutes later. Diane and Kayla left with the unmistakable energy of people who believe they have just restructured a small country in their favor. There was a looseness to their walk, a satisfaction in the way they said goodbye. They had arrived as critics. They were leaving as founders. I washed the coffee cups. Jade appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Evan," she said. "Jade," I said. "What are you doing?" I looked at her, genuinely warm, completely calm. "Following the rules," I said. "To the letter, starting now." She looked at me for a long moment, the look that means she's running calculations. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay," I agreed. And somewhere across town, I imagined Diane and Kayla already on the phone with each other, pleased and certain, dividing the credit between themselves. The rules were set. The experiment was live. All I had to do was nothing, which, as it turns out, is the hardest thing in the world to watch. She bought the course the same afternoon the meeting ended. Then, inside the course, there were supplementary modules, premium content, a coaching add-on, a workbook, a private community membership with a monthly fee that auto-renewed unless you found the cancellation button, which was designed by someone who clearly wanted you to not find the cancellation button. I watched this happen in real time from the couch. Rule 2. Feelings are sufficient grounds for action. Analysis of outcomes is not supportive behavior. "Looks great," I said. She hadn't opened Module 1 by the time the instructor's energy started feeling off. Then the app migrated to the second page of her phone, which in our house is the digital equivalent of a shallow grave. The Breathwork subscription, for reference, was on page 4. We were still paying for that one too. I said nothing. I did not reference the ceramics class. I did not reference the Italian lessons. I made tea. I followed the framework. Then Jade quit her job. I want to give that sentence the space it deserves. Jade quit her job. Not because it was a bad job. Not because she had another one lined up. Because she was, in her words, finally ready to stop letting fear make her decisions. Which is a beautiful sentiment. Genuinely. I've seen it on mugs. Rule 2. Feelings are sufficient grounds for action. Rule 3. Support must be unconditional. Rule 4. Male initiative is appropriate only when requested. That's a big step, I said. I support you completely. She looked at me, waiting, I think, for the follow-up. The gentle but have you thought about, the careful what's the plan for, the completely reasonable we have a mortgage, Jade. Nothing came. That's it, she said. You made a decision. I support it fully. No questions, no caveats. She nodded slowly. The nod of someone who ordered something and isn't entirely sure they wanted it, but the waiter already left. The job search went the way job searches go when you describe leaving your previous position as a spiritual realignment, which is to say, it did not go well. HR, it turns out, is not a spiritually flexible audience. I did not say anything. I followed the framework. Then came the hardware store. We were buying paint samples, which should take 11 minutes and requires no expertise. Jade got into a disagreement with one of the staff members over whether a particular finish was matte or eggshell. She was wrong, not ambiguously wrong, demonstrably, technically, according to the label printed directly on the can, wrong. The staff member was being patient, then less patient, then doing that thing retail workers do where they smile with their mouth and give up with their eyes. Jade looked at me. This was the look that historically means back me up or clarify the situation, whichever is more useful right now. Rule 4. Male initiative is appropriate only when requested. She had not requested. You're doing great, I said. It escalated for another 3 minutes. Jade bought the wrong finish, realized it on the drive home, and spent the rest of the afternoon in the compressed silence of someone who has swallowed an entire argument whole. That evening, she looked at me directly. You knew I was wrong. I believed you, I said. Rule 2. She stared at me for a long moment. I hate Rule 2, she said. I wrote that in the log. Then came the living room. Jade decided to rearrange the furniture. Full reorganization. Couch to the other wall, bookshelf rotated, armchair relocated to a corner that, structurally speaking, does not have room for an armchair. Love the vision, I said. 2 hours of moving things around later, she stepped back and looked at the room with the expression of someone who has just opened a present and found a slightly worse version of the thing they already had. The couch was blocking the window. The bookshelf was at an angle that made no geometric sense. The armchair was technically in the room, but also technically in the way of the door. She said. It's a bold choice, I said. It looked different in my head. A lot of things do. She turned. Should we move it back? Rule 4. Initiative only when requested. What do you want to do? I said. I'm asking what you think. I think whatever you decide is the right call. She made a sound that was not a word. Just a sound. It communicated a great deal. We left the furniture exactly where it was for 2 days, because neither of us wanted to have the conversation required to move it back. We just lived in the wrong room, like two people who had agreed to rent a place they'd never actually seen. Then there was a hard stretch. I will keep this one brief because Jade has asked me, specifically and with feeling, to not linger here. The atmosphere in the house had become brittle. The new marriage rules we were testing, designed to give her total autonomy and remove my interference, had instead left her in a state of constant high-wire tension. Without my usual input, she seemed to be vibrating with the weight of every choice. Eventually, she snapped. The pressure found its outlet in a series of massive delivery orders, quantities of greasy, heavy comfort food that I can only describe as ambitious. As she sat among the empty cartons, the inevitable cycle began, a wave of crushing guilt, followed by the familiar, sharp fear of losing her shape. In a frantic, impulsive attempt to outrun that guilt, she bought a gym membership. It was the premium tier, personal training included, non-refundable, a digital penance for the calories consumed. Of course, there was no gym visit. The membership sat in her inbox like a ghost of a resolution she didn't have the energy to keep. Throughout all of this, I could see she was waiting for something from me. A piece of advice, a gentle critique, even a lecture. Anything to push against. But I stayed loyal to the framework. I supported every order and every silent gym payment, sequentially and without comment. Each time I nodded and said nothing, I watched her get visibly annoyed, her jaw tightening as she realized I wasn't going to break. She tried to play it cool, wearing a mask of, "I've got this," but I could see it was exhausting her. She started to realize that my presence, the questions, the slight raised eyebrow, the "are you sure about this?" delivered at precisely the right moment, hadn't been control. It had been ballast. And without it, she wasn't just free, she was drifting. Then came the video. Jade had decided to start a social media presence, a documentation of her new chapter, which, given everything, was either brave or optimistic. And by this point, the line between those two things had become extremely thin. She set up her phone on the kitchen counter. Good light, decent angle. She was going to talk about reinvention, about the courage it takes to choose yourself. It was genuinely not a bad premise. She's compelling when she talks about things she cares about. She always has been. What she did not notice, because she was focused on the camera, and I was observing Rule 4, which states that unsolicited input constitutes overreach, was that our dog Biscuit had stepped into the frame behind her. Right there, in the center of the shot, Biscuit began an activity that was neither brave nor optimistic, but purely biological. He started to defecate, right on the edge of the area rug, with a look of intense, soul-searching concentration. I watched. I said nothing. I didn't move to stop him or even cough to get her attention. Rule 4. Unsolicited input is overreach. Jade talked for 4 minutes about reclaiming your narrative and breaking free from old patterns. She was poised. She was articulate. She was, ironically, talking about clarity while a disaster was unfolding in high definition just 3 feet behind her. She posted it without a second glance. The video went viral, but not for the reasons she'd hoped. The internet, with its specific and often cruel energy, ignored her message entirely. The comment section was a goldmine of puns and time-stamped jokes about the real reinvention happening in the background. It was a comedy of errors. She had become an overnight sensation, but as the clueless background girl, not the lifestyle guru. Jade found out early the next morning. I know because I heard the sound from the bedroom. Not a word, just a sound. The sound of someone watching something happen that cannot be unwatched. She came downstairs holding her phone, the screen still glowing with a comment that had 5,000 likes and simply read, "The dog really said what we all feel about motivational speeches." She looked at me. I looked at her. "You saw it," she said. It was not a question. "Yes." "You didn't say anything." Rule 4. She put the phone face down on the counter, very carefully. The carefully of someone managing an enormous amount of internal weather. "Evan," she said quietly. "Jade," I said, equally quietly. And then she did something I hadn't expected. She didn't explode. She didn't accuse me. She sat down at the kitchen table, put her head in her hands, and let out this long, slow breath, the kind that carries 11 days of everything inside it. "I don't like this," she said. "I don't like any of this." "I know. This isn't—" She stopped, started again. "This isn't what I wanted." "What did you want?" She looked up. Her eyes were tired. Not sad tired. Done tired. The tired that comes right before clarity. "I wanted you to act like my partner," she said. "Not like a system. Not like something that just confirms whatever I'm already doing and watches it fall apart." I waited. "I got so in my head," she continued. "After that Saturday, my mom was talking and Kayla was talking and it all sounded so logical and I let it in. All of it. It sounded plausible," I said, gently, genuinely. It sounded like they understood something I didn't. But they don't even... She shook her head. Kayla called me 3 times this week asking how things were going, and I kept saying, great, amazing, so much better. And the whole time the furniture was in the wrong place and I was stress eating and our dog destroyed our rug on the internet. A brief pause. Biscuit really committed to that rug, I said. She looked at me. Then something cracked open and she laughed. The real kind, not the polite kind. And then she was half laughing and half exhaling everything she'd been holding. And I sat down next to her and put my arm around her. And for the first time in nearly 2 weeks, the room felt like our room again. Even rearranged wrong. Even with the couch blocking the window. I want you back, she said. The actual you. The one who asks annoying questions at annoying times for completely reasonable reasons. That guy's still here, I said. He was just on a mandated leave of absence. The leave is over. Understood. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Outside, Biscuit was sitting next to the rug looking profoundly innocent. They're coming over tomorrow, she said. Mom and Kayla, to check on the progress. I nodded. How are you feeling about that? I asked. She sat up straight. The tired was still there, but underneath it was something new. Something that looked a lot like resolve. I'm feeling, she said, like it's time to update the framework. They arrived with the energy of inspectors. Not guests. Inspectors. There's a difference, and it lives entirely in the posture. Diane walked in with her chin slightly elevated. The way people carry themselves when they expect to be impressed and have already decided to be generous about it. Kayla was right behind her, phone in hand, with the alert expression of someone ready to document findings. I had made coffee again. Same cups, same cookies, creatures of habit, all of us. Jade was already at the table when they came in, but she was sitting differently than she had at the last meeting. Straighter, quieter. The stillness of someone who has already made a decision and is waiting for the right moment to say it out loud. Diane sat down, looked around the room, the rearranged room, the couch still blocking the window, the bookshelf at its senseless angle, and smiled the smile of someone choosing not to comment on something they've definitely noticed. So, she said, with the warmth of a woman settling in for good news. How has everything been? She did not finish the sentence, because Jade spoke first. It's been a disaster. Clean, no preamble, no softening. Just the sentence, placed on the table like something heavy. Diane blinked. Kayla looked up from her phone. I bought a course I didn't finish, Jade continued. I quit my job without a plan. I got into an argument about paint in a hardware store and lost. I rearranged the furniture, and now the couch blocks the window, and I can't figure out how to fix it without admitting the whole thing was a bad idea. I stress ate for 4 days. I bought a gym membership I haven't used. And our dog destroyed the rug on camera, and it has 100,000 views. She paused. None of that, she said, is what a good framework produces. Silence. Diane opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again with a different strategy. That's not the framework's fault, she said carefully. He followed it exactly, Jade said. Every rule, every time, no questions, no pushback, complete support for every single decision I made. She let that land. And it was the loneliest I felt in this marriage. This is the moment Diane and Kayla had not prepared for. They had prepared for conflict with me. They had talking points for that. They had counter-arguments and reframings and the general rhetorical infrastructure of people who had spent several days building a case. They had not prepared for Jade. Diane recovered first, because Diane always recovers. She pivoted smoothly, the way people do when the original argument collapses and they need a new load-bearing wall fast. He did this on purpose, she said, looking at me now. This was calculated. He agreed to the rules specifically to prove a point. I set down my coffee. I followed the rules you wrote, I said pleasantly. To the letter, with genuine commitment. If the outcome proved a point, that's the rules doing, not mine. You set her up to fail. I removed every obstacle from her path, I said. No questions, no hesitation, No historical context. Unconditional support as specified. If that's setting someone up to fail, I paused. Then I think we have an interesting question about what the rules were actually designed to do. Kayla jumped in. You were never acting in good faith. You were just waiting for things to go wrong. I looked at her with the patient expression of a man who has been waiting for this exact sentence. Kayla, I said, you've been in your relationship for 3 years. In that time, your boyfriend has forgotten your birthday twice, shown up late to things that mattered, and last month you told Jade he criticized you in front of his friends and called it a joke. I kept my voice entirely even. I respect that relationships are complicated. I genuinely do. But advice about what a good marriage looks like lands differently coming from inside a healthy one. Kayla's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I turned to Diane. And Diane, you've been divorced for 11 years and haven't had a relationship that lasted more than 8 months since. Which, again, complicated, human. I'm not judging the outcomes. But you came into my home with a legal pad full of rules for how my marriage should operate. I picked up my coffee again. I'm just noting the gap between the expertise and the credentials. Diane's chin came up. That is incredibly accurate, I offered. Gently. The room got loud for a few minutes. Diane and Kayla pushed back the way people push back when they've been cornered by something true. Loudly, emotionally, by expanding the original argument until it includes enough territory to hide in. There was something about my tone, something about my arrogance, something about how this was exactly what they'd been talking about. This right here. This was the control, the manipulation, the enough. Jade's voice, flat and final, the way a door closes when someone means it. Both of them stopped. You came into my marriage, Jade said, and told me my husband was suppressing me because he suggested I think about a purchase for a few days. She looked at her mother first, then her sister. That's what started this, that one moment, and you turned it into a constitutional convention. Diane started to speak. Mom. Just the word, that was all. Diane stopped. I love you, Jade said, both of you, but I need you to go home. And I need you to understand that what happens in this house is between me and Evan, not a committee, not a framework, not a shared document. She glanced at Kayla. Not a shared document. Another silence. A different kind this time. Not the silence of processing, but the silence after something has been settled. Diane stood. She had the compressed expression of a woman who has more to say and has made the calculation that now is not the time to say it. She picked up her bag. Kayla followed, phone face down for once, which felt significant. At the door, Diane paused. I just wanted to help, she said. And underneath the defensiveness, underneath the ego and the legal pad, and the 11 years of opinions about relationships she'd been waiting to deploy, underneath all of it, she meant it. I could hear that she meant it. That didn't make her right, but it made her human. I know, Jade said, but help that makes things worse isn't help. It's just involvement. Diane nodded once, left. The door closed. For a moment we just sat there, the two of us, the rearranged room, the couch blocking the window, Biscuit asleep in the corner, fully innocent, dreaming whatever dogs dream about after a hard week of destroying property. Then Jade looked at me. Okay, she said. Okay, I said. I owe you an apology. You owe me help moving the couch back. She laughed. And this time, it was completely unencumbered. No exhaustion underneath it. No residual tension. Just the laugh. Clean and real. The one that's been in the room with us since the beginning. I got lost, she said. I got into my head about the course thing, and then they were there, and everything they said sounded like it explained something I couldn't explain myself. And she shook her head. I outsourced my own marriage. It happens, I said. Not again, she said. Not a question. A decision. I nodded. Then, after a moment, for what it's worth, the course thing. I could have said it better. Instead of sit with it, I could have just asked what you liked about it. What made you want to do it? I skipped ahead to the practical part and missed the part that actually mattered to you. She looked at me. She paused. Yeah, that's actually what it felt like. I'll work on that. I'll work on not calling my mother every time I have a feeling about you. Deal. We shook on it. Actually shook on it. Which tells you something about where we were that afternoon and also something about us in general. Then we did what people do when they've been through something ridiculous together and come out the other side intact. We made a plan. Not a framework, not a constitution, just a plan. The kind that involves two people and no legal pads. She was going to restart the job search with a different pitch. I was going to help her prep. We were going to go to the gym together on Saturday, not as a rule, just because she'd asked and I wanted to, and see how it felt. The video with Biscuit, which was still accumulating views at a rate that defied explanation, was going to become its own thing. She had personality and presence, and the internet had already decided it liked her dog. There were worse starting points. And at some point during all of this, while we were talking about the blog and the job and the gym and the slowly growing Biscuit cinematic universe, Jade said quietly, I think I need some distance from them, Mom and Kayla. Not forever, just enough space to remember which thoughts are mine. I looked at her. How much space? I asked. She thought about it. What if we moved? I raised an eyebrow. Not far, she said. Just different city, fresh start, no weekly tea, no constitutional conventions. She paused. I considered this for a moment. The mortgage, the logistics, the timing, all the practical, reasonable, completely valid concerns that a person with a functional brain would raise before agreeing to relocate their life. Yeah, I said. Okay. She stared at me. That's it? No questions? Oh, I have many questions, I said. I'm going to ask them over the next several weeks in an organized and thorough manner. She smiled. The real one. The one that has been my favorite thing in every room it's ever been in. That, she said, is the most romantic thing you've ever said to me. We moved the couch back that evening. It took 12 minutes and one minor disagreement about angles that we resolved without a legal pad, a constitutional framework, or any outside consultation whatsoever. Biscuit supervised from the doorway. The window was unblocked. The room was ours again. And somewhere across town, I like to think Diane and Kayla were sitting together, going over everything that happened, absolutely certain they were right, already preparing for the next intervention, and completely unaware that the only thing they had successfully restructured was our timeline to leave, which, honestly, was the most helpful thing they ever did for us. If you felt this story hit hard, drop a like, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps Steelheart beating.